Tesla, my Tesla. Got a bunch of stuff I wanted to react to, give my perspective on and opinion on in regards to Tesla here today, folks, on the Reaction channel. First thing is in regards to exporting to Canada from China. Second thing is this situation, okay? And third thing I want to talk about is Tesla now reversing course and essentially actually raising prices. And I also want to just spend a moment just talking about future Tesla numbers and kind of my thoughts on that as well. Hope you guys enjoy this. As always, appreciate everybody. I think we're now over 26,000 subscribers on this channel, so we're growing rapidly. I appreciate every single person that enjoys the channel and has subscribed to the channel. Also, if you're planning on joining us on Patreon, get in there ASAP because that $10 tier is about to go away, just so you are aware. That's going to be a pinned comment down there so you can see the moves I'm making in the market and how I'm running that portfolio there if you're interested in that. That is a pinned comment down there, okay? So first thing up here, Tesla readies export of Model Y to Canada from China. Now, this is interesting. Tesla has begun producing in Shanghai, a version of the Model Y to be sold into Canada this year. The first time it will ship cars to North America from China. Now, from my understanding, the margins they're going to get out of that Shanghai factory now and in future years is always going to be pretty much the creme de la creme, right? Which makes sense. Like if you're going to have a factory in China, like usually you're just going to be able to produce cheaper and better and faster than anywhere else, right? And so this is a very intriguing situation because from my understanding, they were already exporting some vehicles to Europe out of Shanghai, and now they're going to do this to Canada. And I don't think they're going to do it to the United States, if you're wondering that. And if you're wondering why wouldn't they start exporting to the United States, okay? My opinion on that is I think they're going to ultimately use Mexico. When the Mexico Gigafactory gets online, which should be online likely next year at some point in time, I think they're likely going to use that. If they're going to talk about, exporting to another country, I think they'll use that out of Mexico. And obviously they're going to continue to use their facilities in North America as well in terms of the United States of America. But I think the Mexico Gigafactory margins will be significantly better than what they're producing out of Austin, what they will, are producing out of Fremont or anywhere else for that matter. And it's not because the workers are better in Mexico or worse in the United States or anything like that. It just comes down to math. It comes down to labor. It comes down to wages. And we do know in Mexico, you're going to be able to get labor at significant discounts compared to that same worker that's, say, at the Austin Gigafactory. Because if somebody's working at the Austin Gigafactory, they're going to want $20+ an hour, if not $30+ an hour. In Mexico, you're not paying, $30+ an hour. I can just tell you that, unless it's some sort of senior manager at the facilities or something like that. So ultimately, people are so caught up into Tesla's short-term margins, but the more I look at it, the more I'm bullish on Tesla's long-term margins. I'm not bullish on Tesla's 2023 margins, but I'm very bullish on Tesla's long-term margins, which we'll get into it maybe a little bit more a little later on in this video here. So not really too much of a surprise when it comes to that, right? I don't know if you guys saw this. Ford Ranger blocks 3 Tesla Superchargers, risks a hefty fine. And when I first saw this headline, I was like, from today, I was like, oh, this got to be in the United States because it's something I would expect in the United States, honestly, right? And no, it wasn't actually. The owner of a Ford Ranger appears to purposely be blocking 3 EV charging bays at Tesla's Supercharging Bay in Box Hill, Australia. It's called icing, as it refers, is when petrol or diesel car owners intentionally block electric vehicle charging stations, sometimes because they are threatened by, it's just ridiculous, okay, whatever reason it is. They hate EVs. I've seen this happen in the United States before, where somebody parks a big lifted truck and blocks a bunch of spaces. I'm just like, what for? I don't get it. I'll never understand the hatred some have toward EVs and to Tesla and things like that, and it's been going on for the longest time. This is, you can find stories about this for a long time in the United States, and I'm like, what for? And you're going to potentially get big fines for this. You're going to really get fined hundreds of dollars just to park your vehicle to block a bunch of charging stations. It's just, to me, it never made sense. But then again, I just don't get why people get so caught up in this stuff, right? Why? Why, man? Why? But they do it, and nonetheless, it is something that goes on out there, okay? This is interesting. Tesla reverses course, raises prices on top 2 models. After a series of price cuts throughout most of the year, Tesla is raising the prices on its 2 upper-end models, the Model S and Model X. The decision is a reversal of its strategy that was confirmed just this week by Elon Musk during a conference call with investors. The call followed a supposedly disappointing, depends on which way you want to look at it. There were certainly some disappointing numbers in there, right? But obviously Tesla's making short-term decisions for long-term gain, right? Short-term pain for long-term gain. We've taken a view that pushing for higher volumes in a larger fleet is the right choice here versus a lower volume and higher margins, right? Which is very much an Amazon approach over the last, I would say, 15 years or so, right? So they moved up some pricing on the Model S, which is obviously high-end, right? And on the Model X as well. Now, in regards to Model 3, Model Y, don't be surprised if at some point in time, though they raise prices on those again. They don't. I think some people are coming to the false assumption that they're just going to keep pricing down forever. I can tell you, if suddenly, the Fed starts dropping rates here, and let's say the environment gets better for Tesla when it comes to getting loans, right? I can tell you, Tesla's likely going to start raising price on those vehicles again, okay? So don't just assume like whatever price they're getting now is the price forever. We've seen Tesla move around pricing. From what we heard on the conference call, what the CFO said on the conference call, they asked him, how often do you guys look at pricing and adjusting pricing? The CFO said, they're looking every week, okay? They're looking every week on if they should adjust pricing up, down, all around. And so this is something to think about in regards to Tesla is like, and you don't hear this talked about as much when they're actually raising pricing. It's a lot more when they're actually lowering pricing, okay? And so just that's all I'm going to say about that situation. They could definitely raise price in the future. Now, if we look at some Tesla numbers here, okay, this is interesting. So these are future projections for Tesla in terms of EPS and kind of what the PE is based upon these estimates in future years and whatnot, okay? Now, first off, I don't pay any mind to whatever analysts have for anything further than basically about a year out. And the reason being is analysts have enough trouble getting numbers roughly in line over the next 1 to 2 years, never mind, 3 years out, 4 years out. And also, look at how ridiculous these numbers are, right? Also, supposedly Tesla's only going to grow 9% in 2028. But supposedly they're going to grow 71% in 2023. But look there's only one analyst that puts up those numbers, only 4 analysts, right? So it's these numbers, it's like, okay, interesting, I guess, but it's just complete waste because I'm telling you, none of these numbers are going to be even remotely close to accurate, okay? So what I like to look at is what they have for 2023 numbers and what they have for 2024 numbers, right? So, if you look at valuation-wise and you're wondering, is Tesla stock overvalued or undervalued, those sorts of things, right? You're looking at a stock right now that's at a forward P of 47 based upon what analysts have them doing this year for EPS numbers, right? Now, if you think about it in the context of if we wanted to think about, let's say, Ford and GM, okay? Let me pull up those because I know those are the ones everybody likes to compare. Oh, Ford's at this, GM's at this. Let me show you those. All right, so I popped up Ford and GM here, right? So Ford, they have basically EPS going down 13% plus this year, right? But then they have it going up 7% in 2024. And who's to say Ford's EPS is going to go up in 2024, right? They're another company that's trying to transition to EVs, and from my understanding, they're losing an absolute fortune for every EV they sell right now. Are they going to magically fix that? I don't know, because it doesn't seem like they have any sort of overwhelming demand right now. And you're going to have to get up to massive scale to even think about profitability of these vehicles, right? But also, it seems like Ford's just going to have to get an epic amount of cost taken out of their vehicles as well when it comes to the EV front, if they want to even dream about making profits. So I wouldn't be surprised at all, even if the economy doesn't get bad, which obviously if the economy was to get bad, unemployment was to go up, then their EPS is going to be down in an epic amount, much more than actually it will be this year, right? But even if we stay in a fairly decent low unemployment, let's say 3-4% range, right? I'm not so convinced they're going to be able to grow EPS. I think their EPS is likely going to go down again next year, okay? If we look at somebody like General Motors, they have them doing a 2% EPS growth next year. I don't know about that. General Motors is in the same boat that a Ford's in, okay, in terms of they need to continue to bring down costs massively in terms of EVs, and everybody's transitioning that. I think that's going to be tough, and never mind that. Guess what happens in 2024? Cybertruck ramps in a massive way, right? Cybertruck's going to go into production this year, but in terms of massive ramp, it's going to be 2024. And if you think that's not going to be a competitive threat to the higher end Ford truck models and the GM higher end Silverados, I can tell you got another thing coming, baby, because that is absolutely going to be a competitive threat to the high end Silverados and Chevy trucks, GM trucks in general, as well as any higher end Ford trucks as well. Okay, lower end, is it going to be a threat to the F-150? Not in the short term, but is it going to be a threat to the higher end models? 100%. 100%. And if you think differently, I'm just telling you, you're in for a rude awakening in that whole situation, right? So, in my opinion, you're likely getting companies that EPS are going to probably keep going down here over the next few years, okay? Versus a Tesla that you're going to see a massive acceleration in growth. So, let's just assume Tesla and GM, right? Let's assume both those companies' numbers are accurate, which I don't agree with. I don't agree with this, but let's just say it, okay? Let's just use these two as an example. So 44% growth expected in earnings per share next year, right? General Motors expect to have 2%, which once again, I don't think that's even going to happen, but let's say that does. So let's do a little math on that. That means Tesla's going to outgrow GM over 20x in earnings per share next year, over 20x. So if that's the situation, then Tesla should be commanding a forward PE next year of 100 plus, of a 100 plus. But where's Tesla at? Tesla's at a 32. That's not 100 plus, but that's what it should be. Because if Tesla's outstripping that sort of growth, they should be commanding that sort of valuation, folks, okay? And so at the end of the day, like when I look at Tesla, I see a company that's undervalued right now, and undervalued by quite a bit. And this is a very different situation than a few years ago, because Tesla's played catch up in regards to their growth now versus where it was a few years ago when we were talking about $1 trillion market cap here, and the valuations come down substantially. So as Tesla stands here today, I'm looking at a Tesla that I believe is undervalued versus a market. Whereas everybody looks at this and they're like, oh, GM's at 5 forward PE, Tesla's at 32 or 32 PE based upon 2024 numbers, GM's at a 5 based upon 2024 numbers, right? I'm just telling you, like, you got to look at the growth. The growth matters in a substantial way. And ultimately, Tesla's undervalued. And if you want to say General Motors is overvalued, you could say that. I'm not going to say that. All I'm going to say is Tesla's significantly undervalued, folks. Significantly. And I think Tesla's in a prepping up mode to make its next massive move kind of up here. And competition, where's the competition coming from? I've been in the stock for so many years now. I think it's 5 years now I'm coming up on been in the stock, right? When I first got in the stock, it was Audi. Oh, the e-tron, it's going to take out Tesla, right? It was BMW. Oh, the BMW i-Series or whatever they had at that time. Ooh, Mercedes is coming. That's what Jim Chanos and all these guys. It was Audi. It was BMW. It was this, right? Then the conversation a few years started to go to Ford, GM, Volkswagen. And they started saying, oh, just wait. Ford's coming, GM's coming, Volkswagen's coming, okay? We're already into the second quarter of 2023, and none of those companies were even remotely competitive threats to Tesla, not even close. And now what they've shifted to is, it's the Chinese companies. The Chinese companies are a major competitive threat to Tesla, right? And we've just seen Tesla put up some amazing numbers over the past few years in regards to China, right? In the Shanghai Gigafactory, and continue to put up great numbers. So when you look at this more and more, you got to ask yourself, like, where's the real competition coming for Tesla? I mean, they don't have to have a dominant market share in China. If they can have 7% market share long-term in China, do you know how many vehicles that is? Do you know what that's going to mean for their profitability? They don't have to have 50% market share. When I've ever looked at my Tesla numbers, I've always imagined them having, 40, 50%-ish type market share in terms of new vehicles sold at the end of this decade in the United States of America, not in China. China, they're going to have a very similar market shares like Apple, in my opinion, where Apple has, 30 to 50% market shares in most developed markets, but they don't have that sort of market share in China. But still, Apple's, does phenomenal in China. You don't need to be a 30%, 50% market share in China to have an extremely successful business. And that's the exact way, like, if the whole EV market in China in China, the whole auto market's going to EVs. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, and you understand that, that's a market that long-term is going to sell I mean, I think probably 70 to 100 million new vehicles a year, approximately, I think long term, right? Robotaxi, we'll see what happens with that. That could mess up those numbers. But let's just say 70 million to 100 million long term, right? As more and more folks enter the middle class, and we got 1.3 plus almost 1.4 billion people that live there. Gosh, think about if they're selling 70 million cars a year in China, right? At the end of this decade. And Tesla has, a 10% market share. There's 7 million cars a year just in China. Now, let's say you think it's 50 million cars they'll be selling it per year in China, right? In terms of total vehicle market in China. Go ahead and run the math on a 10% market share for Tesla at 50 million vehicles a year. That's still 5 million vehicles a year Tesla selling, right? So when I'm just like the short sellers of Tesla, like the naysayers on that stock are they've been missing this boat for the longest time, and I think they continue to just miss it, and they're missing it by a pretty wide margin, in my personal opinion. So even at let's say end of decade, you see China selling 50 million new cars a year, right? No, let's say 40 million. Go a lower number, 40 million per year in China. Go lower number, and let's say 5% market share for Tesla. 5% market share will go down to. There's still 2 million cars a year. Are you flipping my flapjacks? Just in China? Come on, man. Then do the United States numbers, where they're going to have likely 30 to 50% market share, in my opinion. Same thing in Europe. Run the numbers, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, this is a company that's producing 10 million, if not more than 10 million cars a year. And that's just the auto business. Never mind the services business, which continues to expand. And imagine what that's going to be 5-10 years from now. Never mind the robotaxi opportunity. Never mind what they're doing in AI, which Elon Musk said could be a multi-$100 billion opportunity they're going after there, right? And none of that's even in any of the numbers. Robotaxi's not even in any of these numbers. None of that's in any of these numbers. All we're talking about is autos. We're not even talking about storage business. We're not talking about the solar business. We're not talking about anything else they're working on in the energy with the most talented workforce of engineers in the world. We're not even talking about any of that, folks. Okay? So, anyways, that's my perspective on that. Yes, Tesla is actually undervalued right now. I appreciate everybody joining me as always. Thanks so much. If you want to support the channel, you enjoy the content I put out, then support me on Patreon. That will be the pinned comment down there. And if you're interested in the $10 tier, that is going to be going away very shortly here. So if you're interested in that, being able to see my moves out there, then join that. If you're interested in that tier plus the Discord chat, then check out the other tier, and that's the one we're going to keep long term. Much love and have a great day.